Welcome to KindTale Studios AI, where kindness and imagination come to life.
Benny Bunny and the Moonlit Map. In a quiet forest, just as the very last stripe of sunset slipped behind the trees, Benny Bunny stood at the edge of a soft clover patch, brushing tiny crumbs from his paws. The evening air was cool and sweet, and little fireflies were beginning to glow like floating
Crumbs
stars.
off.
Just
Benny,
then, down a
look!
curved tree
I
root came
found a
tumbling Benny's
map!
best friend,
Wow,
Pip the
it's
field mouse,
magical!
holding
Let's
something
go!
very special in both paws. It was a curled piece of birch bark, a map. And not just any map. This one shimmered with silver dust. Benny's long ears lifted high. Pip carefully spread the map across a smooth stone. There, twisting and turning across the bark, was a glowing trail that wound past Fern Hollow, across Owl Creek, and deep into the oldest part of the woods. Benny packed carefully for the journey. Into his satchel went blackberries, dandelion leaves, a soft moss blanket, and a tiny acorn shell cup for water. Pip tied a spool of grass string across his shoulder and proudly wore an acorn cap like a helmet. Then, side by side, the two friends stepped beneath the ferns and into the dusky forest. Fireflies floated around them like lanterns. Benny led with calm, careful hops. Whenever roots twisted across the path, he slowed down and helped Pip safely over. When thorny brambles blocked the way, Benny gently bent the branches aside so Pip could slip through without a scratch. Soon, they reached Owl Creek. The water rushed fast and
This
silver
path
in the
looks
moonlight.
slick. I'll test it first.
Benny
Be
paused.
careful, Benny!
He looked
One
closely.
paw at a time.
Then he
You're
chose
doing
the
great!
safest
I
crossing
made
of
it!
all. A fallen log stretched low across the narrowest part of the creek. Pip climbed onto Benny's back, holding tight. And with soft, steady hops, Benny carried his friend safely across. On the other side, they rested in a patch of dry moss. Benny offered Pip a drink from the acorn shell cup, and the two friends took a quiet breath before continuing on. Deeper in the woods, they spotted a young duck tangled in curling vines beside the trail. Benny hurried over at once. Pip pulled the leaves aside while Benny carefully nibbled through the twisty stems one by one until the duck was free. Then Benny gently guided it away from a dark hollow and toward a shining pond nearby, where it waddled safely home. The forest grew taller and darker as they journeyed on. At last, they came to a thick wall of brambles. Pip climbed onto a stump and searched the leaves. Benny studied the ground below. And there it was, a little hollow beneath the thorns. Benny began to dig fast but carefully, making a tunnel under the brambles. Pip helped by tugging roots aside and laying soft moss along the bottom. Together, they wriggled through. And when they popped out the other side, covered in leaves and dust, they found themselves in a moonlit grove. A ring of pale mushrooms glowed softly around a mossy stone marked with a star. Pip unrolled the map again. Benny looked closely. And suddenly, the silver trail began to move. It lifted right off the bark and reappeared glowing on the forest floor. The path now led toward the biggest, oldest oak tree in the whole forest. Off they ran. The glowing trail curled through bluebells and up a hill until at last they reached the great oak. Its roots were thick and knotted, and hidden among them was a tiny wooden door. Benny tugged away the ivy. Pip pressed his paws to the bark, and together they pushed the door open. Inside was not treasure. Inside was a warm little hollow where a hedgehog family sat beside an empty basket and a torn piece of birch bark. Pip held up the map. The torn edge matched perfectly. The silver map had not been leading to buried treasure at all. It had been a store list. A gust of wind had carried it away, and the hedgehog still needed berries, herbs, moss, and acorns before the coldest night arrived. Benny and Pip looked at one another, and at once, they got to work. All through the night, they gathered everything on the list. Benny carried heavy berry bundles and soft moss. Pip rolled acorns and bundled herbs with grass string. Again and again, Benny chose the gentlest path, the safest crossing, and the steadiest way home. By the time the sky turned pink with morning light, the hedgehog's shelves were full, their beds were warm, and their little roof was patched tight against the cold. Outside the oak, Benny and Pip sat side by side, tired and happy, as silver dust rose from the map and twirled into the sunrise. And at their feet, two tiny star-shaped flowers bloomed. They had set out to find treasure hidden deep in the woods, but with kind paws, careful steps, and hearts that kept others safe. Benny and Pip had been the treasure all along.